Alright, that is enough. Now, errand boy, I mean battle lord, go and get me a sandwich. With extra mayonnaise. Yes, Odin. What was that? Yes, oh mighty, all-powerful, wonderful Odin. You are so great. That's better. Now go on. Eitrig, kill me. Spare me from this. Oh, man. Oh, hello, everyone. Yeah, sorry about that. You caught me in the middle of doing my regular duty as a warrior throughout Legion, licking Odin's boots. Yeah. If you haven't heard me say it on camera before, in my opinion, the warrior had it the worst in Legion when it came to the order halls and just the campaign and such. I mean, this isn't a warrior order hall. This is just Odin's place. And there's no one of significance here. Just a bunch of Valajar. Eitrig is like the only exception. And Odin. And the campaign is just us doing Odin's bidding. The warrior is not the leader of the order hall. He's just Odin's errand boy. But anyways. You guys didn't tune in to hear me rant about Odin. For goodness sakes, there's even stuff here like the favorite of Odin, the legend of Odin, 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 Odin. I hate Odin. Yeah. Now, you turned in to hear me talk about the lore of the weapons. Are the weapons even worth getting? Well, yes and no. But let's go ahead and read up on them. First off, for the arms warrior, Stromkar, the Warbreaker. Human history is not complete without mention of Stromkar. With this blade, a visionary warlord named Thoradin united his race into a single nation. He led his people to victory against the trolls in one of the greatest wars humankind has ever fought. He changed the destiny of the world. Stromkar's story is one of violence and bloodshed, of cunning and desperation, and ultimately of bravery and sacrifice. Couple things. One, you're probably noticing the appearance here. This is actually the secret appearance that you get from Sourfang. It's actually pretty easy. You just find him at Crassus, and he's like, we're gonna fight. And then we fight him here in Skyhold, and he's like, alright, I'll teach the guy, the blacksmith over there, to show you how to make it look like this. That's pretty much it. It was very easy to get. Another thing, just a funny little tidbit, because it mentions the trolls. I found this out when I was taking this character, for Mogs and Mounts in the Throne of Thunder raid. If you go there with either the weapon or the transmog of this weapon equipped, all the troll trash that you find there just cower in fear. They don't really fight you or aggro you. They just cower in fear at the sight of Stromkar. They even comment on this, and I was so shocked at this when I didn't really know what was going on until I saw one of them make a comment on it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. It's always fun when new stuff has an effect on older content that you didn't think had it before, and then you find it's just kind of a cool little Easter egg. The early human tribes had many legends about giants who had once walked among them. These mighty beings had many names, but the most common attributed to them was Vrykul. The folk tale said that the giants watched over humans as parents would watch over sons and daughters. The Vrykul taught their primitive children the ways of foraging, of masonry and smithing, and of making war. By the time of Warlord Thoradin, the Vrykul of the human lands had long since died out. What little remained of their presence included weapons they had left behind. The humans treated these arms as sacred heirlooms and symbols of their tribes. But the blade later known as Stromkar would become much more than that. In Thoradin's hands, it would become a symbol of all humanity. From Chapter 8 of The One True Human Kingdom by the historian Lore. Even as the brutish Amani trolls raided and pillaged, the human tribes bickered and squabbled with each other. Only Warlord Thoradin and his Arathi tribe recognized the folly of their ways. If they did not unite, the moss-skinned trolls would crush humankind and desecrate its ancestral lands. So it was that Thoradin declared himself king and set out to bring the tribes to heel. Many he won to his side through the marriages of his sons and daughters, others through promises of wealth and land. But some closed their ears to words of diplomacy. They spoke only the language of violence. Fortunately, Thoradin knew that language well. For weeks, Thoradin and his warriors struggled to conquer the rugged mountain people known as the Altaraki. I hope I pronounced that right. Though the upstart king was confident that he could subdue the tribe if given enough time, he knew the cost would be very high. To prevent unnecessary bloodshed, he changed his tactics. Thoradin shed his battle armor and painted his chest with Arathi tribal symbols. With only Stromkar in hand, he marched up the mountain and challenged the Altaraki leader, Igneus, to a duel. Before long, Igneus emerged from the forest, skin dyed red with his own tribal marks, blade sharpened and hungry for death. He dwarfed Thoradin in size and strength, but the Arathi leader had other advantages. He had chosen the duel on a day when thick fog enveloped the mountains. Using the weather to his advantage, Thoradin eluded Igneus's wild swings and disarmed his bigger foe. Igneus was at Thoradin's mercy, but the Arathi leader did not strike. He plunged Stromkar into the damp earth and extended the hand of peace. On that day, he won the Altaraki to his side. The only human tribe powerful enough to end King Thoradin's dream of unity dwelled in Tirisfal Glades. A great warrior named Lordain led the region's noble people. They would not submit to shows of force like the Altaraki. To win their loyalty, Thoradin needed to appeal to their religious beliefs. Thus, Thoradin and his personal guards made a pilgrimage to the region's shrines and sacred groves. At each site, the king performed rituals, as was the custom of Lordain and his kin. Thoradin even wore a pendant of the Silver Hand, an image held sacred by Tirisfal's humans. At the end of the pilgrimage, Thoradin met with Lordain. The king pledged that if the tribe joined him, he would adopt their mystic ways and spread them among the Arathi. To seal his promise, Thoradin ran his palm along Stromkar's edge and mixed his blood with the earth of Tirisfal. The histories record Thoradin as saying, "Between our people, let this be the only blood we spill." And so it was, Lordain and his people bent the knee to King Thoradin. From Chapter 14, same book, same author. Thoradin and the other early human warlords held their swords and axes sacred. Many believed that the spirits of their ancestors lived on in their weapons. With this in mind, it's quite extraordinary that Thoradin convinced all of the human tribal leaders to lend him their personal blades. Arathi blacksmiths took shards of metal from each of these weapons and added them to Thoradin's great sword. It was an act of brilliance, for it secured the eternal loyalty of the tribes. Who would ever rise up against Thoradin and risk striking the sword that contained their own ancestors? When the work was done, Thoradin renamed his sword, Stromkar, the Warbreaker. With the human tribes united, King Thoradin set out to found a new capital. According to one legend, he discovered his answer in a dream. In it, he saw his father wearing the pelt of a black wolf. He told Thoradin of an arid land southeast of Tirisfal Glades. If the king built his capital there, his people would prosper. Thoradin sought out the land from his dream, a region known today as the Arathi Highlands. As the story goes, the king spied a black wolf roaming the barren terrain. On that spot, Thoradin used Stromkar to carve out the boundaries of his city in the dirt. Then he set his masons to work. So arose Strom, mighty capital of the first human kingdom. Thoradin was not a king to sit idle on his throne. just as Stromkar was not a sword to sit idle in its sheath. The Arathi military patrolled the far-flung borders of the human territories, repelling Amani troll incursions. King Thoradin took part in many of these skirmishes, often at great risk to his own life. One account tells of a brutal Amani ambush that struck Thoradin's forces. The trolls routed the humans, separating the king from his warriors. Though he was outnumbered 10-1, Thoradin did not flee. He did not beg. He did not cower. No true Arathi would stain his honor with such craven acts. Thoradin sharpened Stromkar's edge on the skulls of his enemies and painted its steel with their blood. When the guards finally reached him, they found their king standing over 10 broken Amani corpses. That's like the end of an action movie. All right, we're here to help. Oh, you killed them all already. From Chapter 29 of The Warring Tribes and the Rise of Arathor by the historian Evelina. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. To defeat the Amani, Arathor and the High Elves of Quel'Thalas forged an alliance. King Thoradin marshaled over 20,000 human soldiers and launched his armies at the Trolls. The decisive battle unfolded at Alterac Fortress. The Amani host besieged the stronghold, while the humans defended the fortress from the onslaught. The High Elves smashed into the Troll rearguard. Thoradin waded through Amani warbands with the rest of his soldiers, Stromkar hacking down troll after troll. Once the king knew his forces had worn the enemy thin, he revealed his secret weapon. 100 human magi emerged from Alterac Fortress. Alongside elven sorcerers, they pulled their power and unleashed a single terrible spell on the Amani. A column of fire ripped down from the heavens and blasted through the trolls. The howling torrent of flame burned the Amani to ash. Thus, the Troll Wars ended, with human and elf triumphant. After the Troll Wars, Thoradin embarked on a diplomatic mission to Quel'Thalas and secured humanity's bond of loyalty with the High Elves. The king created a military pact so that each side would help the other if the Amani ever threatened their lands again. He also carved out new territorial borders with the elves and drew up trade agreements to foster the prosperity of Arathor for generations to come. Before Thoradin left Quel'Thalas, the elves gave him a gift. Their greatest blacksmiths and enchanters toiled over Stromkar and imbued it with extraordinary power. Thoradin marveled at the masterwork of the elves. The new Stromkar gleamed with an otherworldly beauty. It weighed almost nothing in Thoradin's hands, and no matter how often he used it, the edge never seemed to dull. As his years wore on, a grizzled Thoradin abdicated his throne in peace. He broke tradition and kept Stromkar as his own, though some bristled at what they considered an act of greed. Thoradin retained the blade for practical reasons. Stromkar had become a symbol of kingship. Thoradin wanted Arathor's citizenry to see his bloodline as the legitimate rulers, not simply whoever wielded the sword. Free from the burden of leadership, Thoradin spent much of his time studying ancient ruins in Tirisfal glades. He became obsessed with the origins of humankind and with the tales of giants who once walked the land. Thoradin learned to use Stromkar's enchantments to locate hidden places of power. During one of his journeys in Tirisfal, Thoradin and a retinue of his followers entered mysterious catacombs buried beneath the earth. According to the legends, none of them were ever seen again. Many strange tales exist about what befell Thoradin, but the truth is the strangest of them all. In Tirisfal glades, he discovered 2 long-lost subterranean chambers. One belonged to the noble keeper, Tyr. The other to a monstrosity known as Zakaj, a bloodthirsty servant of the malevolent old gods. Before written history, Tyr had sacrificed himself to defeat Zakaj in a battle that shook the heart of Azeroth. The Keeper's allies buried both combatants at the site of their mythic confrontation. and they sealed the tomb with magical wards to prevent anyone from disturbing what lay inside. Unaware of the great darkness locked beneath the earth, Thoradin instructed the Magi in his retinue to break the seals. They succeeded, and in so doing, their arcane spellwork inadvertently resurrected Zakaj. As the lumbering creature tore through Thoradin's followers, the former king did not flee. He did not beg. He did not cower. No true Arathi would stain his honor with such craven acts. Thoradin sharpened Stromkar's edge one last time, bearing the sword into Zakaj's skull. The blade's elven enchantments forced the horror into a deep slumber and prevented it from regenerating. It was Thoradin's last great act. At the moment of his strike, he suffered a mortal wound from Zakaj. The warrior who united humankind died that day, Stromkar stained with the blood of one final enemy. So, that leads then into the quest, which is actually a pretty cool quest, where we go to the place in Tirisfal, which, by the way, has synergy with the Shadow Priest and the Holy Paladin, with the Arms War being first, where you go there and you find Stromkar still buried in Zakaj, and you take it while also trying to ensure that Zakaj stays dead, basically. Now, the Arms War doesn't really finish off Zakaj, but the Shadow Priest then does later with Zalatath. Up next, Fury. Oh my gosh, guys. This is the secret appearance for the Fury Warriors weapons, and let me tell you guys, this took a long time to get. So first off, you have to get exalted with the Valajar in Stormheim. Then you have to do three things and get three things. You have to kill two separate world bosses, both of which are dragons. Then you have to farm the dungeon here in Stormheim, which is here in Skyhold, and take on hold on. Yeah. So then you have to get something to drop from Skovald, which is like supposed to be like a haft or a binding. The idea is that you take this part, you hold the handle from him, and you get... In fact, let me see if I can show you which bosses it were. The two world bosses you're supposed to kill, which is these two, Nithog and Sharthos. You kill each of these, and this is supposed to be either of their skulls on that. That's the idea behind the making of these weapons. But oh my gosh, it took forever, because one, you have to get to Exalted, because those things won't drop until you get to Exalted. Then once you do, you have to make sure that those bosses are actually up for you to get them from, and you have to keep going into the dungeon here to get to drop off of Skovald, which has a very low percentage drop. It was a pain to get this appearance. Anyways, back to the reading of the lore. Odin's Fury, Helya's Wrath, War Swords of the Valajar. Keeper Odin believed the natural creatures of this world were too weak, too soft, and too short-lived to be trusted. You have already shown him his folly, and none of us have any doubt that you will continue to do so. Because, of course, that's all that matters, right, is whether or not we prove Odin right or wrong, because he's the only one that matters. Sorry. Now you will carry Odin's prized weapons in defense of Azeroth. Go forth and forge your legacy. Keeper Odin was inspired to create an army of Titan-forged champions, the Valajar, and set them to protect Azeroth against the multitude of threats he knew it would face. But his dream was thwarted, and his Valajar were contained for thousands of years. I wonder if he'll say here that it's also because he thought, why are you empowering the dragons? Dragons are stupid. Those silly dragon aspects. The Valajar is where it's at. That's what really matters. Yeah, he basically vehemently disagreed with the Titans with empowering the aspects, and Odin was like, they should empower my Valajar. You know, he has a bit of an ego, if it's not clear. Before Odin was imprisoned, he crafted two blades. They were meant to aid the greatest among the Valajar. Instead, they fell into the hands of his enemies. There we go. May as well show you the blades while I'm talking about this, right? If you're hearing that It's that thing. Light's heart. Sorry. They just happened to place it right here next to it. Can't do anything about it. In ancient days, Odin oversaw the creation of the Halls of Valor, a sanctuary for the spirits of the mightiest Vrykul who had given their lives in glorious battle. He had led the armies of the Pantheon against the old gods, and he knew that there would always be a need for brave, fearless champions to face the forces of evil. The most talented blacksmiths among the Vrykul were asked to create weapons and armor for these peerless warriors. Keeper Odin was awed by the work of one smith. His shields were light and strong, truly astonishing in the hands of a skilled fighter. Odin asked him to try something new. "Focus not only on mere defense," the keeper said, "but also on the poetry of aggression." The smith heeded Odin's words, and soon presented the keeper with 2 of the finest war swords ever made on a Vrykul forge. Odin did not merely accept them, he blessed them with his power. Odin hung these war swords in the halls of valor, and let them motivate the Valajar, his champions. "These will be carried into battle by only the greatest among you. So go then, prove yourself worthy." Because we have to do that a lot when it comes to Odin. Seriously, the amount of times where he's like, "You must once again prove yourself," or pass a challenge or a test. He does this over and over throughout Legion. It becomes very annoying. It would be many years before someone rose to the challenge. The first and only Valajar to carry these weapons into battle was named Ingvar. He was a renowned fighter when he was alive, and a legendary warrior after his death. Always aggressive, Ingvar led a raiding party to investigate a cave that seemed to be dripping with dark magic. Inside they found something terrible, a pack of creatures that had been corrupted by the old gods. When the old gods' war against the Titan Forge had all but lost, Cthulhu quietly lashed out worldwide, seizing the minds of whatever the entity could touch. Ingvar and his comrades were frighteningly outnumbered, but they did not run. Most of the Vrykul fell in minutes, but Ingvar remained standing. Though badly wounded, he fought his way through the cave and destroyed every enemy inside. After his last breath, the Valkyr Helya sent his spirit to the Halls of Valor, where Odin welcomed him with open arms. Ingvar's death had been a noble sacrifice that resulted in victory against incredible odds. Keeper Odin declared him a paragon among the Valajar, and bestowed upon him these war swords. In times of great peril, Ingvar was always the first to lead the Valajar into the fray. But all too soon, his acts of heroism came to an end. When Odin had set out to realize his vision for the Halls of Valor and the Valajar, he had needed to create Valkyr, spirits capable of preserving worthy souls for all time. Helya had not been interested in becoming a Valkyr. No one had volunteered, in fact. Odin had transformed her and the others into Vrykul against their will. That's an important thing to know. He did a number of these things against their will. He was going to make the Valajar and the Valkyrs like, "Anyone want to die and become part of my Valkyr and such?" For some reason, no one did this. No one really wanted to do this. So he forced it on them. I'm not kidding. It even says so right there. Oh, gosh. For many years, Helya had no chance to seek vengeance. When the opportunity arose, she took it without hesitation. Before that, she was basically like a daughter to him. And then he did that to her. It's no wonder she absolutely hates him. Keeper Loken had fallen under the sway of madness, but he was clever. He knew that Odin and his Valajar would be formidable enemies. So he approached Helya with a proposition. He would break Odin's control over her. In exchange, she would trap Odin and his champions within the Halls of Valor. Helya's anger burned deep within her, and she accepted. The plan worked almost flawlessly. Odin was entirely unprepared for Helya's rebellion, and he and nearly all his Valajar were neutralized, confined to their sanctuary in the sky. Only a few Valajar were outside the Halls of Valor when Helya attacked. One of them was Ingvar. He took these war swords and immediately retaliated, hoping to defeat Helya and free Odin. As a Valkyr, Helya had tremendous control over the spirits of the deceased. Champion or not, Ingvar understood that he was facing a fight that he likely would not win. But he had these war swords. Imbued with Odin's power, there was no one else to make the attempt. Ingvar found Helya and tried to strike her down. In his hands, these swords nearly overwhelmed her, but in the end, she overpowered his spirit and smote him into oblivion. His swords fell to Azeroth among the few Valajar artifacts that were not trapped within the Halls of Valor. Helya kept them as a memento of her victory over Keeper Odin. Over several millennia, Helya claimed as many souls of slain Vrykul as she could, and her ranks of Kavaldir, corrupted undead Vrykul, continued to swell. Helya began to go after the souls of not just the heroic Vrykul, dead, but also the living. Any Vrykul who seemed poised to learn the truth about the conflict between Helya and Odin became a target, and she had her Kavaldir slay them with ruthless efficiency. She started to raise her own champions, the Helajar of Helheim, and she had them search Azeroth for her enemies. Any spirits that ended up in Helya's care suffered greatly. Helheim was torment for Vrykul heroes, who found themselves transformed into Kavaldir, even if they had been worthy of entering the halls of Valor as Valajar. Many of these Vrykul became more dangerous in death than they had been in life. Empowered by Helya and afraid of disappointing her, they zealously obeyed her commands. Eventually, one of these Kavaldir caught Helya's attention. Vigfus, Bladewind, distinguished himself in battle against Vrykul, and Helya decided that he was worthy to bear these swords for all time. What better way to end the lives of Odin's faithful than with two of his prized creations? Vigfus Bladewind used these swords to kill many Vrykul heroes over the years. Helya even committed some of her own power into the blades, just as Odin had. Not only did their lethal potential increase, but they made it easier for Helya to claim their victims' souls. In truth, it is her power that makes these weapons truly magnificent. Her power, laced with her hatred, crashes endlessly against Odin's spirit. The tension between those energies will forever permeate these blades, threatening to overwhelm whoever carries them into battle. A single lapse in the heat of combat could result in oblivion. Never forget that. I like how it's warning me. Helya's champion, Vigfus Bladewind, carried these weapons for millennia, spilling untold amounts of heroic blood. On occasion, Helya would test him to see if he was still truly worthy of her favor. She would give him unwinnable fights. Sometimes she would make him battle over exceptional Kavaldir, or she would order him to raid Vrykul settlements without any help. With these weapons in hand, he never failed. In the moments before Bladewind's destruction, he asked Helya for aid. She granted it to him, pouring even more of her spirit into these weapons. This happens during the quest that we go to get them during the fight. When we're fighting him, we actually see that happen. A measure of that extra power remains, and it will for all eternity. These weapons were forged to assist mighty warriors who fight without fear. They turn bloodlust into power, and only one with an indomitable will can hope to control them. If they are ever wielded against Azeroth again, the world may not survive. If they are used to defend it, the world may never fall. Well, it's no wonder everyone plays Fury. And last but not least, of course, Prot. And I, of course, have that secret appearance as well, which I much rather prefer. I love the shield look. The shield is awesome. It's much better than the default one. This is the secret one. But I'm not a fan of the weapon. I wish I could change transmog, it's like, if you try and transmog, this, or put this transmog of the shield on another weapon now, it forces you to have to use the weapon as well, not the shield. It's kind of frustrating in that regard. To get this, you have to keep going to the Neltharian's lair. Not the dungeon, but the location in High Mountain. And you have to hope it procs a event for you to get it, which has to do with Deathwing's roar. Once you hear that roar in there, you can be able to go in and actually acquire this appearance. Let me see. There we go. I'll show you the shield. Who cares about the weapon? It's about the shield, right? Scale of the Earth Warder. These magnificent artifacts were forged from a scale of the Earth Warder Neltharion. As you might imagine, obtaining it came at a high cost. This sword and shield have endured countless battles, wielded by a legendary Vrykul warrior and king. Thanks to your help, his spirits can rest in peace, but his armaments now pass to you. May they bring you the same victories they brought him. Give me a second. Starting to get thirsty there. By the way, the quest for this one is not very good. It's kind of a letdown, really, in my opinion. When Odin created the Halls of Valor, countless Vrykul sought to prove themselves worthy of joining the ranks of his mighty Valajar. Perhaps none went to such lengths as the one who would become king, Magnar Icebreaker. His victories in battle were beyond measure, and the strength of his deeds inspired others to seek their own heroic legacy. Many of his greatest deeds were accomplished with two legendary artifacts, the Scale of the Earth Warder and the Scale Shard. Obtaining them nearly cost Magnar his life, but their power carried him to heights even he never imagined were within reach. Magnar's comrades gave him the name Icebreaker after his successful campaign in Northrend. While hunting nests of Nerubians, Magnar discovered a way to surprise the enemy. Cracks in glacier walls could be turned into tunnels, allowing him to dig deep into enemy strongholds and assault them from within. As he traveled across Azeroth, Magnar saw many powerful creatures, but none enraptured him so much as Neltharion, the dragon aspect of Earth. Vrykul and dragons rarely had reason to interact, but over the years, Magnar never failed to watch in awe when Neltharion flew overhead. With Neltharion's lair close to the Vrykul home of Stormheim, Magnar began to wonder what might be waiting inside. What marvels could the Earthwarder's den hold? What power could the Vrykul obtain? His curiosity would become his obsession. Magnar Icebreaker convinced a raiding party of Vrykul warriors to accompany him into Neltharion's lair. They waited until they saw the dragon aspect leave his mountain, and then they carefully crept inside. They hoped that they would find treasure or artifacts. What they found instead was a host of enemies. Though Neltharion was gone, many of his kin remained. A colossal fight broke out in the smaller side caverns beneath High Mountain, pitting the Vrykul invaders against impossible odds. Magnar led his party in a frantic run for an exit, but before they could escape, Neltharion returned to his lair. The dragon aspect, enraged at the trespassers, unleashed a single lethal breath of fire. There was nowhere to hide and nowhere to run. In desperation, Magnar grabbed a piece of debris from the ground. It was one of Neltharion's cast-off scales. It saved Magnar's life. The blast of flame parted around the black scale, but the sheer force carried Magnar out of the lair, sending him tumbling down the slopes of High Mountain. Magnar was badly wounded, but he survived. A black dragon's wrath was not easily shrugged away. It took years for Magnar to recover from his injuries. He spent the time examining the scale that he had taken from Neltharion's lair. He was in awe of its resiliency. It had saved him from a fiery death without being so much as scratched or singed. Magnar wanted the scale to be forged into a lasting armament, but no Vrykul blacksmith knew how to sculpt something so unusual. As Magnar recuperated, he began to study the art of blacksmithing. If nobody else knew how to unlock the scale's potential, he would learn to do it himself. Few understood Magnar's motivations. Most Vrykul sought a place in the halls of valor through glory on the battlefield, not by working a blacksmith's forge. In time, Magnar would become known as a respectable smith in his own right. The edges of his blades were often sharper and more precise than those of his peers. They needed to be. Magnar knew that he would only have one opportunity to craft Neltharion scale into a worthy shield. When the time came, Magnar retreated to his forge and began to work. Days later, he emerged. In his grasp were two armaments unlike any the Vrykul had ever seen. One was a shield of unimaginable endurance. The other was a sword, polished to a fine edge. It was the last time that Magnar created a weapon. He would never need another. Magnar was already a respected warrior. With his new sword and shield in his hands, he became a legend. Tempered by his disastrous venture into High Mountain, he approached his campaigns with thoughtfulness and discipline, and against his newly forged power, the enemies of the Vrykul stood little chance. Other Vrykul flocked to his side with each victory, believing that Magnar's astonishing feats would usher them all into the halls of valor as Valajar, immortal champions. Funny how they are so obsessed with that, isn't it? Before long, Magnar was leading to a sizable portion of the Vrykul people. Only a few years after forging his armaments, he was known as King Magnar Icebreaker. Magnar Icebreaker eventually returned his sights to the region where he had made his name, Northrend. Remnants of the insectoid Nerubian armies were once again emerging from their caves, seeking to seize Ulduar and the Titan machinery within it. Against Magnar, they did not get far. The king led his people against the Nerubians, pushing them back to the entrance of the Azjol Narub itself. So thorough was the Nerubians' defeat that they ceased all aggression for millennia. No Vrykul doubted that Magnar would ascend to the halls of valor upon his death, and even though Helya had sealed away Keeper Odin and the Valajar, she wondered if Magnar's spirit would be strong enough to make the journey anyway. King Magnar Icebreaker had his sights focused firmly on the city of Stormheim. Now occupied by highborn elves, the Vrykul believed that their path to a glorious afterlife with Odin would be cleared if they once again held their ancestral home. Helya and her followers knew this ambition would provide their best opportunity to bring down Magnar. And with luck, his soul would be dragged to Helheim, not the Halls of Valor. The Vrykul launched a massive attack on Stormheim, surprising the Highborn with their ferocity. For weeks the two sides skirmished. Magnar led the charge. The scale of the Earth Water protected him from the elves' arcane reprisals, and the Vrykul's assault scored immediate victories, building enough momentum to push the Highborn out of the city entirely. The elves' last chance to reclaim the city happened at Nightborn Pass. The Highborn rallied their forces for a final counterattack, clashing with the Vrykul in a brutal confined brawl. In the end, the Vrykul stood victorious. The Highborn were forced to flee for their lives. They never made a claim upon Stormheim again. But it was then, at the moment of Magnar's biggest triumph, that betrayal fell upon him. Mere moments after the Vrykul secured their victory over the Highborn, the servants of Helya struck. Traitors arose within the Vrykul's ranks to slaughter Magnar's closest confidants, and his son, Hruthnir. Amid the chaos, more of Helya's followers, the Helajar, arrived to make sure that Magnar was killed. After seeing his son butchered, Magnar was consumed with rage. He became a whirlwind of death, killing every enemy within reach. Countless Kavaldir and traitorous Vrykul had fallen to his blade before. Finally, they brought him down. His people were able to rally and prevent the Helajar from claiming Stormheim, but they were too late to save their king. In death, Magnar's spirit lingered. His rage stopped him from making the journey to the Halls of Valor, but it also kept his soul from Helya's grasp. For thousands upon thousands of years, He burned with righteous fury, hovering between the life long past and the afterlife he deserved. But now he is free, reunited with his son in the presence of Odin. His armaments remain on Azeroth, destined to bring glory and honor to whoever wields them next. This was definitely the one that got me excited to play a warrior in Legion, because I just loved the idea of us wielding a shield and a sword that are literally made from a scale from Deathwing. Because we know how incredibly durable and strong Deathwing's scales were, right? Not even counting the adamantium plates that he had on his body. Just the scales alone were incredible. And I just loved the idea and concept of wielding a shield like this, because we know how strong that actually is. So, that is it. That is the lore behind the warrior weapons in Legion. And with that, there is only one class's weapons that we have to read the lore upon. The Rogue. And I am still working on the secret appearance for the Outlaw. That's the name of the spec. I'm always tempted to say Combat, because I know that's what it was always called back then. The Outlaw spec, the ones that look like Thunder Fury. So once I get those, then we'll read up on the lore of those weapons. All three of those weapons for the Rogue.